10, but do as many as you want. Any thoughts on that if you had me before? Good idea, bad idea, doesn't really matter idea? You don't have to talk about it at all if you don't want to. I prepared something, but I wanted to hear your guys' idea. Sherry, yeah?
Well, I think it's a good idea, because there are some that you look at and go,
That's kind of why my first reason was, let's make more than, there's only 10 quizzes that are on the schedule page right now. There'll be many, many more. I'm guessing between 25 and 30 available to you before the end of the term. So if you open a quiz and you're like, this sucks, you don't have to do that one. You can just forget that one and grab another quiz that you do not hate. So that's kind of a good thing. Please, Al.
Just kind of going on that too. I liked that because then you don't have to like gamble and do a quiz that you're unsure about and take a bad grade. And then also about having them optional is you get close to midterms and finals, say I decide, oh, I'm going to do 5 quizzes real quick, you know, do those ones. Then hey, I'm at midterms, oh, I don't have to do a quiz or anything, I can take a little break.
Those are 2 very, very good points. And I want to speak to the first one first and go in order. The question was, I don't want to, going with Sherry too, I don't want to hand in a quiz I'm not 100% sure of. If all you know you got in a quiz is you get your name correct, I don't want you to hand that in either. Because this is what has happened historically. This is just last spring. I decided to collect some really, really fresh data for you guys. Last spring I had 123 students in all my classes. What I did was I looked at all 123 of those students and what their quiz grade averages were at the end of the term. This is what I got. This is the average of the individual students' quiz grades. Not how many quizzes they did. We'll get to that in a minute. But look, if you had to describe what the typical quiz average was for a student in my spring 2014 class, what would you say it was? 10 for the mode. I think so. It's a hugely skewed population. Most of them got 10s. If you feel bad about not including the 9, say roughly 90% or more of people average either a 9 or higher, because that's kind of what happened. This is what happens on average. And why does that happen on average? Because you don't have to turn in those 5s and those 4s and those 0s that you're unsure about. You can those, or you print them, don't submit them, and just talk to me about how to do them after the fact. I was hopefully fairly good about getting solution videos posted for you guys when something was due. As soon as something was due, I put a solution video up within a couple days. So you could watch how to do the problems if you needed to. But I only want you submitting stuff that you're super stoked about submitting. Does that make sense? Now this is just the quiz averages themselves. These are people that did 10 quizzes, or 20 quizzes, or even in some cases 6 or 7 quizzes. They didn't do enough. So I also prepared this for you to touch on Allie's second point. Here are, same 123 students. What I did was I looked at some data mining correlations here, fun correlations. I looked at the number of quizzes they did above the mandatory 10. So what would 0 mean? 10. They did their 10, they did no more, no less. Negatives, of course, means that they fell short. And that's bad because I take points away from you then. At the end of the term, there's a box I check in Excel. And at that moment, you lock off the ability to do more quizzes, and I watch a few grades just go because all of a sudden you lose 40 points that weren't counting against you until that point. You won't have this happen to you. It won't happen to you guys. And then you've got these folks up here. So I see some furrowed brows. Do you see a pattern in the data? Is there a pattern in the data? What pattern do you see? This is something we're actually going to get to the analysis of in this class, so I'm pretty stoked about showing it to you now.
The majority are doing right at or just a little bit above.
There's a huge chunk doing right at, and there's a slightly convincingly large chunk that are going above. Down here, there's a few scattered, down the ones that are falling short. But yeah, we got a huge chunk. I mean, I'm going to guess 75%-ish or even more are here or there. Good. Other patterns that you see. Anything else you see in there?
The majority of the A grades are within that same 1 or no more to maybe 3.
Good, 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 good. You've got, tell me your name too.
Ben.
Ben, thank you, sir. The A grades, and Ben's making an assumption which is correct. I go on a 90 to 100 is A, 80 to 90 is B, 70 to 80 is C, and so forth and so on. So when you look just here at this 0, boom. If you had to talk about an average grade for these students right here, what would that average grade be? Ish.
between 80 and 90%.
Mm-hmm. It's right about here, isn't it? Somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah, 84, 85. Actually, I have the exact number on the next slide. I can't remember what it is. But there's a plus or minus on that, and that's part of this course is measuring that plus or minus properly. That's what we're starting doing that on Thursday. I'm just excited about Thursday. So, and each of these has a plus or minus, doesn't it? Each of them. and you can apply that plus or minus. What happens to the plus or minus as you move further towards the extremes of the curve? Any gut feeling as to what happens to that spread? Does it tighten up? Does it widen? Widens? Yeah, there's definitely a bit of variability in this data. So that's why I want you to take a macro view. Look at the entire data set. Does the data set appear to be tilted up or tilted down as you move left to right, if you had to pick? In other words, as your eyes go left to right, where do the dots appear to go? It's slight,
Down.
but it's up. We got down. On this side it goes down, but look at the whole thing, not just the tails.
Okay.
This is tricky. This is part of 244 is learning this. The overriding tilt is slightly up. Slightly, it's not by any means obvious. It's not like those ones I showed you in 244. If you plot the number of Methodist ministers in the United States versus the number of cases of Cuban rum imported, it goes like this. Perfect correlation. And it's obvious. It's not at all obvious, but it is there. It's slight. It's very slight. And of course, it does look like it falls off. Maybe there's a diminishing return at the end, at least in spring 214. I'm not going to, this poor student right here, right? Went 2 over and still failed the course. Don't look at outliers. Don't focus on the outliers, focus on the entire data set. The entire data set shows me that trend. Now let's talk about that trend. We talked about this average value right here about being 84. Yeah, mathematically 85.7. That's the mathematical value of that. So that means, on average, in the spring, students that did no extra quizzes still averaged 85.7, which is almost an A. I mean, you're halfway, you're just past the halfway point of a B. That's pretty damn good. What does this tell us on average? I'm picking on your algebra skills here. Bastard.
Is that the rate that they did, the rate that they turned in?
The slope is 1.7. The rate of change of what?
Average grade.
Average grade per quiz submitted. How many points do you get for every additional quiz on average? You get 1.7 points on your final grade on average for each additional quiz submitted. Careful. That's a correlation, not a causation. Don't just start handing in crap. Well, dude, you said on the first day. I did. I did. You're submitting quizzes and you're not turning in garbage. You're doing good. Remember those averages? The averages were 9 and 10. If you're turning in those averages, that's the correlation and slight causation. But that's what the data shows. I tell you guys this every term. I've told this to my students for like 3 years now, but I've never backed it up with data. And finally I'm like, oh, what the hell, let's back it up. And I did this. I was peeing myself, I was so happy. It's positive 1.7. Stoked. I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good. All right? So that's the point of the quizzes. That's the point of the quizzes being optional and also turning in as many as you want. It seems to be historically the more you turn in, as long as you turn in quality work, your grades are going up. So they're not extra credit if you turn more in. They're not extra credit. What they are is they're boosting your grade, but it means that everybody can potentially have different numbers of points by the end of the term, right? Somebody turns in 10 quizzes, you've got 100 points worth of quizzes. Somebody turns in 12 quizzes, you've got 120 points worth of quizzes. So you and your neighbor, theoretically, everybody in this class could have different point values. That's okay. It's choose your own adventure. It's okay. I'm trying to break free of that academic, it has to be this way. I don't think it has to be that way. I think it can be this way. You can let me know at the end of the course when you do my evals. You can let me know what you think of it. Speaking of ends, let's end right now